On Christmas Eve, December 24, 1945, in the quiet town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family gathered inside their large two-story home, preparing to celebrate Christmas. It was a peaceful evening filled with laughter, wrapped gifts, and the excitement that only Christmas could bring. But before dawn, that joy would turn into one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries, a case that continues to puzzle investigators nearly 80 years later.
Who wants the next one?
The Sodder family was led by George Sodder, a successful Italian immigrant who had built a thriving trucking business after arriving in the United States. His wife, Jenny Sodder, was devoted to raising their 10 children.
Merry Christmas, my love.
By all accounts, they were a close-knit family, respected throughout their community. That
Merry
Christmas Eve
my
seemed
love.
perfectly ordinary. The younger children begged to stay awake and play with their new toys
Merry
while the older
Christmas,
children
my
helped
love.
prepare the house for bedtime. Eventually, George and Jenny retired
this?
upstairs.
You
Five
will never
of their
find
children,
out.
Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny Jr.,
They
and
grow
Betty,
up too fast,
remained
don't they?
downstairs, promising they
Merry
would finish
Christmas,
their
my
chores
love.
before going to bed. Around 12:30 a.m., Jenny awoke
Who is
after
this?
hearing the telephone ring.
You will never
She
find
answered,
out.
but the caller was a woman she didn't recognize. Strange laughter echoed in
Who
the
is this?
background before the woman apologized
You
and
will
hung
never
up.
find out.
Jenny thought little of it and returned upstairs. Before falling asleep again,
Who is this?
she noticed something unusual.
You will never find out.
The downstairs lights were still on. The curtains remained open. The front door was unlocked. She assumed the children had forgotten to finish their chores and simply went back to bed. About 30 minutes later, she was awakened again, this time by a loud crashing noise on the roof. It sounded as though something heavy had landed above the house. Again, everything became quiet. She drifted back to sleep. Then, at approximately 1 a.m., Jenny was jolted awake by the smell of smoke. Opening her bedroom door, she discovered flames rapidly spreading through the first floor of the house. Within seconds, panic erupted. George rushed through the burning hallway, desperately trying to wake the rest of the family.
Get out of the
Four
house!
of the children sleeping upstairs escaped through the smoke-filled
children!
rooms, while George and Jenny
children!
barely made it outside
Get out of the
alive.
house!
But then they realized something horrifying.
Children!
Get them out!
5 of their
Please,
children
someone
were
help us.
missing.
They're still inside!
The
too
children
late.
sleeping
The whole thing is
downstairs
coming
never
down.
emerged.
My children!
George
Get them out!
immediately tried to
someone help
re-enter
us.
the blazing
They're still
home,
inside.
but the
It's too
fire
late.
had become
The whole
too
thing
intense.
is coming down.
Thick smoke and collapsing timbers forced him back. Desperate, he searched for another way inside. He ran to the side of the house where a ladder was always kept against the wall. It was gone. He then raced to one of his trucks,
start. Why won't
intending
you
to
start?
drive it beneath
Please,
an
start.
upstairs window so he could climb onto the roof. Shockingly,
Come on,
both
start.
trucks
Why
refused
won't
to
you
start.
Please start.
The same trucks had worked perfectly just hours earlier. As neighbors gathered, frantic attempts were made to contact the local fire department. The telephone operator couldn't reach anyone immediately. Instead, one neighbor drove into town personally to report the fire. By the time firefighters finally arrived several hours later, the house had already burned to the ground. Officials searched the ashes. Their conclusion was immediate. The 5 missing children had died in the fire. The case, they believed, was closed. But George and Jenny refused to accept that explanation. Something didn't make sense. Experienced firefighters later admitted that even house fires of similar intensity usually left behind recognizable human remains, bones, teeth, or other identifiable fragments. Yet investigators claim to have found absolutely nothing belonging to the 5 children. No bones. No skull fragments. No teeth. Nothing. George became convinced that the children had never died inside the fire at all. Then even stranger discoveries began to emerge. Witnesses came forward with bizarre reports. One woman claimed she saw the missing children looking out of a passing car while the fire was still burning. Another waitress at a roadside diner insisted she served breakfast to 5 frightened children accompanied by 2 unfamiliar adults the following morning. A hotel employee later claimed to have seen children matching their descriptions staying overnight with several mysterious adults shortly after Christmas. None of these reports were ever fully investigated. The mystery deepened further when experts suggested the fire may not have been accidental. George discovered that the home's telephone line had not burned through. Instead, it had apparently been deliberately cut before the fire began. Someone had physically severed the wire. Then came another disturbing revelation. Months before the fire, George had reportedly argued publicly with people who strongly disagreed with his outspoken criticism of the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini during World War II. One man allegedly warned him that his house would someday go up in smoke, and that his children would be destroyed. At the time, George dismissed the threat. After the fire, he could never forget it. Investigators also questioned how both trucks mysteriously failed to start during the emergency despite functioning normally beforehand. Even the missing ladder was never adequately explained. Years passed, but the Sodders never gave up searching. They erected a massive billboard along a busy highway displaying photographs of the 5 missing children. The sign offered a substantial cash reward for information leading to their whereabouts. Thousands of travelers saw the billboard every day. Most tips led nowhere. Then, in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, an envelope arrived unexpectedly. Inside was a recent photograph of a man in his 20s. On the back, someone had written, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. The young man strongly resembled Louis Sodder, one of the missing children. George and Jenny were overwhelmed with hope. They hired private investigators and attempted to trace the photograph's origin. But the trail quickly disappeared. The sender was never identified. The man in the photograph was never located. To this day, no one knows whether the picture truly depicted Louis, or whether it was an elaborate hoax. As decades passed, countless theories emerged. Some believe the children died in the fire despite the missing remains. Others suspect they were kidnapped before or during the blaze. Some speculate the fire itself was intentionally set to cover an abduction. Still others believe organized crime may have played a role, pointing to George's business dealings and wartime political disputes. No theory has ever been proven. The Sodder parents never stopped believing that their children had survived. Jenny wore black in mourning for the rest of her life but continued hoping for answers. The billboard remained standing for decades, becoming one of America's most recognizable missing person displays. Even after George's death, surviving family members continued investigating the case. Today, the Sodder Children Disappearance remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American history. Did 5 children perish in a tragic Christmas fire? Or were they secretly taken into the darkness while the flames distracted everyone? Nearly 80 years later, no one knows. And somewhere, if the impossible happened, the truth may still be waiting to be discovered.